I'd like to welcome you all to the Energy Transition Dialogues, today, Wednesday, November the 17th. I'm delighted to be joined by Jessica Wade, who's Academy Associate, Chatham House, and Senior Global Advisor for Azure Energy, and Mr. Antonio Della Pelle, Kellogg Brown Root Asia Pacific Director of Advisory Consulting. Thank you very much for joining us. Antonio, I believe this is your first time joining us on the Energy Transition Dialogues. It's good to have you here. Jessica, good to see you again. We've got the bulletin headlines there up on the screen for everybody, and I believe our two guests have had a chance, hopefully, to look at those. And we're going to be discussing today hydrogen's role in the net zero future, partially, following the COP26 meetings that we had last week, and looking at that in the context of what the impetus has been to push more for clean energy there. But Jessica, I'll start with you, and I always like to ask our guests to choose one of the headlines that we've got up there from the bulletin that may have caught your interest, and why.
I'm going to pick the League of Arab States to finalize Pan-Arab hydrogen study. I know we're going to speak about hydrogen, but it also gives me an opportunity to flag what the League of Arab States is doing in addition to the hydrogen study. So that article highlights that the League of Arab States is currently developing a Pan-Arab green hydrogen study, which is very important, and it highlights the need for collaboration between Arab states. But the article also highlights something also, I think, very important to highlight, which is regional electricity market exchange. So the League of Arab States is already also working on an integrated Arab regional market for interconnected electricity market by 2038. The timeline seems to be a bit far away, but connecting the electricity grid and the Arab states is very important. It's also very important for the green technologies and in the area of renewable energy to tackle some of the intermittencies and the variabilities of renewable energy. At the current stage, we do have interconnection grids between several Middle Eastern and North African countries. However, most of them are really inactive. We find that in the Gulf, the interconnection grid is operating at 5% of its capacity. So it's very important to develop the pricing mechanisms, the governance structures, and the electricity planning model, and to integrate all this grid for better electricity exchange and integration of low carbon technologies in the power system.
Well, I mean, on that point, Jessica, as you bring up the GCC and the region, and just focusing a bit on, as you said, the electricity grid ambition has been there for a long time, but it's had its shortfalls in terms of getting off the ground, if you like. If we look at hydrogen, which is obviously in its early stages from an initiative point of view, but a lot of projects that have been signed by GCC, NOCs, and governments with their partners, and so a lot of initiatives taking place there. I mean, just to start off with a general question to you, do you think that, looking at hydrogen, do you think that GCC can become a significant hub for the world for production of hydrogen and for export? Should it be focusing on that rather than an electricity grid in the interim?
Well, it has good potential. As you said, it's very early stages. What the Gulf states have in terms of petroleum producing economies is that they already have experience in logistics, in transport, in storage, which would help in the hydrogen economy. If we look into green hydrogen, also the Gulf states have the advantage of having vast lands, but also very low cost of renewable energy deployment, which would help to deploy green hydrogen. So these are going to be assets. Financing and other standards, safety issues need to be addressed like everywhere in the world, and collaboration is going to be very important in kickstarting the market. But I also want to flag that if we do want to reach net zero energy systems, but also have decarbonized economies, we need to look not just into one technology and cherry pick one technology, but optimize the use of different low carbon technologies across the different value chain.
Antonio, welcome again. Let's go and give you a chance to pick a headline there from our bulletin as well to get you going.
Yes, so On the news, I would like to pick up the China news more because I'm based in Asia, so I'm doing a lot of projects in Asia, and I would like to share our understanding of the market in Asia. I think on those news, what is important is for people that have read it, it talks about the price of hydrogen. This is for road transport. KBR last year completed the hydrogen roadmap study for the Singapore government. Our report is already available, so you can download it. And really, one areas we highlighted is for hydrogen roadmaps. Each country will be different because your end sector may be different. So in the article talked about China, the road transport to be a major sector. If I look, Singapore definitely was not a major sector because Singapore and island smaller. In Singapore, a major sector was data center. Now, if I look at the Adani articles, it talks about data centers. So now what you can see is when you create an hydrogen roadmap for a country, but also as a business strategy for a company, you really need to have in mind your off-takers, who they are. Because today, green hydrogen, you pay a premium. And not every sector is ready to pay for that premium, but there are sectors that are ready to pay for that premium. So what I've seen in Asia is that many countries have a different first category of takers. And that's quite interesting when you do your roadmap or when you do your strategy to say, okay, which target should, which sector should target. Then
and on that point of off-takers, of course, that is absolutely key. For supply to come on board, you need to know who's going to be taking it on. And yes, it's going to differ by country to country. But let's talk about Asia, as you're there and specializing in that region. Where are we at with that in terms of securing the hydrogen demand, if you like? Yeah. Otherwise we're not going to see the investment come in that's needed.
Yeah. So this links up to your question that you had for Jessica about Middle East being a hub, hydrogen hub. In Asia, if you look at the hydrogen hub, definitely you think about Australia. But India is also bullish on this. But anyway, if you have a lot of renewables, you can theoretically be an hydrogen hub. From our studies, what we have seen is that today the shipping or transportation costs affect the landed cost. But by 2040-50, it doesn't make much difference. So what does mean is even in Singapore, what we're saying, you can import hydrogen from Chile, will not make much different price from Australia. And there are huge differences. But that's key point, because now if location is not that more important, it's the timing, who comes in the market first. So then going back to Asia, what we see is in Australia, we also, as KBR, we involved in few feasibility studies right now. But if you count, there have been announced 60 green hydrogen projects, 60. So you can understand, we are, if you don't announce hydrogen project, you have some problem with your strategy. But how many of those 60 projects really will become a project? Because that is the key point. Now you really need to understand how the full value chain exists, because we talk a lot about hydrogen. COP26 did not talk too much about hydrogen. They talked about reducing emissions, but not directly we want more hydrogen. But if you look at hydrogen, the ecosystem is not there. The value chain is not there. And to build one, it takes time, because you start from the supply, but then you need to transport, you need the ships, you need the pipeline, or what is it, and then you need the end users. So I think right now on the news, hydrogen is always on the top. When you look on the projects, really you start to look at what you need to do next. So that I think is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the nitty-gritty. Jessica, let's go to that point. As you said, the Middle East is well set up already in its kind of transport distribution of other fuels, and so it has a natural advantage there, perhaps. But what about, obviously scaling up any project like that requires, obviously, and to give investors confidence to invest the billions, trillions that are needed almost. I mean, I've got a figure here. Globally, we've had $160 billion of direct investment already in large-scale hydrogen projects, but we're going to need almost 10 times that if we're going to be, achieving our net zero path, if you like, along with other measures. And let's look at the region here in the Middle East or elsewhere. Is the policy side of things clear enough for that investment to really come through?
So yeah, policy support is very important in terms of having national strategies, targets, but also financing mechanisms. How are we going to attract all these necessary investments? So the policy support is very important, but it's also lagging behind not only in the region, but also globally. So if we look into national strategies, which are key drivers in moving hydrogen economy forward, we find that so far we only have around 10 countries that do have national strategies. Probably only 4 or 5 who do have roadmaps and action plans. And then around 6 other countries also are in the process of developing strategies. One of them is in the region, which is Oman. Most of the countries are EU members. So in this process, we're lagging behind. Of course, we do need policy support. We do need national strategies. We do need significant research and development capacity to drive this forward. Also, if we look into the green hydrogen, we still have very high losses. So if we look 30 to 35% of the energy is going to be lost in electrolysis. So we need massive research and development capacities and investments in financing incentives.
Okay, and so what are those incentives? I mean, how are we going to get there? As you said, green hydrogen still, from a cost point of view, it's still 4 times the cost of blue hydrogen. Of course, the Middle East has an advantage there with blue hydrogen because of its natural gas and the systems that are already in place. And the argument is often made that that should be as equal a focus as green hydrogen for the time being. But so what is missing? Is there a clear roadmap, whether it's in the Middle East or not, for that investment to come through? I mean, what is it going to take?
So in the Middle East, the first thing, so I find myself always on this podcast mentioning this for various technologies, but you need to phase out fossil fuel subsidies as a start. You need to have standards, safety processes also, because ammonia does have a hazard for safety. For example, we need to build the infrastructure, access to finance. If we look into other technologies, we need to have tax incentives in a way, provide early stage development financing, flexible financing and blended finance also for this. Finance incentives are going to be very important. In the case of green hydrogen, we also need guarantees of origin to guarantee that it's actually green hydrogen. We need massive additional renewable energy capacity to deploy green hydrogen. So a lot of policy supports needs to be in place, and we also need to encourage a lot private investments, which also attract a lot of foreign direct investments into the region. If we're going to talk about the Middle East, which chronically we've had issues in attracting FDI.
Yeah, Antonio, just looking at Asia or even as Europe, if you have any insight on that from the countries that would want to import this ammonia, for example, or hydrogen. I mean, on that front, public-private partnership in terms of getting these investment sort of setups going. Again, where would you see the gap there in terms of incentivizing that to happen more quickly?
Yeah, I would say, let's start with something that was similar in the past that we went through, the LNG business. When we looked at liquefied gas, the way the business model worked was you had to guarantee your off-takers and then you get financing. And now if you do the hydrogen, we are not working that way. Because even if you guarantee the off-takers, the price is still not competitive. For the LNG, the price was driven by the electricity market because LNG was utilized on the power market, and the government would give you some help because in the sense that the electricity price was controlled or help. So in this case for hydrogen, what we see is, okay, we are not looking on the off-takers for financing because the hydrogen price, the green hydrogen is much higher than blue or the gray hydrogen. And we do need to see government intervention. So now the government needs to play a role. Now, how they play a role can be different. But definitely, if we expect that the economics of this project will be the drivers for this project to happen, then we know that we are set for failure. we need to help these projects. And this is similar to what we did in renewables. We had feed-in tariff for many years before it became, so I don't see hydrogen any difference, But today, no government is taking the action. Maybe some governments do it for some sectors. So what we do see is a lack of government's drive maps. But at the end of the day, if you go to calculate, we are talking about billion and $billion government needs to, commit. That is no easy. It's never easy. But the good thing that always.
I mean, we saw in COP26, just to go to one of the points that Jessica made about, one thing that's needed is that these fossil fuel subsidies need to come down more. And it's not just in the Middle East, which is renowned for that, but you have subsidies of all types on fuels across the world. That's a government initiative, obviously. And to link to that, do we need to see, for example, for us to really see a way forward for hydrogen investment and commitment, do we also need to see more progress, Antonio, on the carbon price pathway, if you like, which hasn't made, again, much progress. Maybe in Europe to an extent it has, but that has to also be there. The incentives have to be there. This is incentives for others have to be there. So how important is that, Antonio?
Yeah, definitely. If you have a carbon price in your financial model, you will see it makes a difference. And but it depends where you are, it makes sense or not. But ideally, yes, you would like to have a global carbon price. Ideally, in an ideal world, you want to trade the carbon like we used to trade the crude oil, so that it doesn't matter where it comes from. I trade my CO2. The problem is the crude oil you put in a ship, you know where it comes from. CO2 is a bit, you cannot hold it. It's somewhere, and so definitely need a carbon price and a carbon market. We have seen Europe with ETS or doing well, but China wants to do it, start to do it. But definitely all other countries or many other countries are a bit skeptical, or they want to watch, or they are not pushing for it. So now if I look at the context in Singapore, we do have a carbon tax. But as you know, in Singapore, the current carbon tax is, I think, $5 Singapore dollars per ton. So it's very nominal. And here we are talking about, maybe 10 times bigger to be. It's the market that really does not like too much to say, okay, this is an additional cost. So carbon definitely can help, but would happen in the next 3-5 years to have a global carbon price? Most likely is not. Feed-in tariff, government knows about it. Yeah, they have done it. All have done it. Now, if I look UK back in the 70s, they did the subsidies for the wind offshore industry. And that was renewables, but the purpose was to create an ecosystem that was made in UK, then you would be exporting. So, hydrogen would provide a similar opportunity with electrolyzers, shipping, or other things. So I think we need to look a bit more on the full supply chain, where are there opportunities, and not just focus on the $4 per kilo, $2, because that is not the point. The point is how I can shift to hydrogen. It's not $4 or $2. Yeah.
Jessica, in terms of blue hydrogen, we just mentioned that earlier a little bit. It's being seen obviously as a very good interim solution, obviously. I mean, hydrogen is not new, but in terms of even making that more scalable in this coming decade, and we could look at the Middle East or elsewhere, but again, the technology is the CCUS technology that again is being invested into, and arguably is becoming almost commercial. How much will those developments and further sort of research into CCUS, will that help to make blue hydrogen scalable? And then obviously in turn, we can turn our attention to green.
Well, yeah, the different shades of hydrogen. What I do worry about in the focus on blue hydrogen is that we get stuck in a phase of transition, like when we discuss natural gas as a transition fuel until we decarbonize our energy systems. So I do fear that when we put a lot of investments into a transition medium, that we actually get stuck in it, and that we're at the stage where we need to double down effort in decarbonized systems. I would prefer green hydrogen, especially that the costs are going down. We expect the cost to be much lower by 2030. If when we look at the cost of green hydrogen now, it's 2 to 3 times more costly, more expensive than blue hydrogen. But more investment and more deployment is going to drive costs down. But I also do believe that, on the other hand, when we are deploying all the necessary infrastructure, that it would also help end the green hydrogen. If we do put in place the standards, specifications, then we already a step further into achieving a green hydrogen. But also in the region, since we do have very low cost of renewable energy, I do believe that we need to take advantage of this and scale up green hydrogen.
Yeah, and one argument that has been made is that, for example, in the region, one way is to start mandating, large manufacturing industrial industries to take that solution on board, if you like. I mean, do you think that's a viable route for especially in a region where everything is run very much from a national perspective and owned that way? In the Gulf, for example, mandating aluminium industries, mandating the big extractive industries here also to use that, if you like, as a fuel with the right incentives. I mean, is that one way to go again to guarantee off-takers and set the
so the need is obvious. The need is there. We do have wide applications for hydrogen, and the need is obvious. But if we want to drive demand, we do need to provide some of the things you mentioned in addition to others. But we're not operating in a vacuum, so we can learn from the experience of renewable energy. So the targets and having national strategies and clear roadmaps and action plan did play a role in driving renewable energy forward, in addition to other policy support and financing initiatives, of course. But having mandates and targets would definitely be a key driver in driving the demand, because the need is obvious. We do have the technology as well, but we also need to drive that demand. And that's one way. The other way is, well, carbon pricing and taxing. And now when we will look into Europe, the EU is currently discussing cross carbon border tax, which might also be an incentive for other countries. Financing but we also cannot lay targets without providing financing incentives and providing some financing premiums for these sectors to follow through, of course.
Antonio, just to go to COP26 a little bit. I mean, you mentioned we didn't hear much about hydrogen there. They were fretting about too many other things. Obviously, coal was a big headline, and trying to see what the world could do about that. And of course, didn't see much progress there. And even fossil fuel subsidies, as you said, there wasn't much movement on reducing or getting further commitments to that. And why do you think that is? I mean, why is it that we didn't see more focus? As you said, Jessica just mentioned, renewables have made great progress in a very short space of time. Costs have been brought down quicker than people expected. But it took a long time to get the commitment on board there. Have we learned any lessons from that in terms of new clean fuels like hydrogen, in terms of global cooperation and commitment?
Yeah, here my response is more speculative. I don't know, why the COP26 agenda was a certain way and others. But if you think what the government has committed to do, let's say review every 5 years, so they may think that 5 years is too short to have an impact with hydrogen, because now we are in feasibility phase. Then you need to do detailed studies and then plan. So you may start to have hydrogen in the market with 2025, 28, 30. So now if you put a lot of emphasis on hydrogen and 5 years later, people say, what do you do? Oh, I'll just start my construction. It doesn't look good. So I can understand as a policymaker that hydrogen is not really a good topic for me to talk to my voters. Yeah. Now, if I look for us as the energy industry, we need to think about hydrogen and do things about hydrogen now, because what will happen in 10 years' time, we decide now. So now we are not talking about what will happen in 10 years' time, but we need to do it now. So,
and what about doesn't the heavy transport industry provide a huge incentive to push on that front? Aviation fuel alternatives, obviously trucks, and even shipping, obviously in time. I mean, that's clearly all three big global industries that need a solution which other clean fuels cannot provide.
Yeah.
And renewables certainly can't.
Yeah, and there, for example, if we take shipping, definitely we talk a lot about hydrogen as a solution for decarbonizing the sector. We talk about ammonia. We talk about biofuels. We talk about putting a scrubber for. So again, we are giving a lot of options to the industry. Now, if you are a ship owner, you know that you build a ship today and it will run for the next 30 years. Now, if you ask me, okay, Antonio, how do you build your ship? I don't know. Shall I build directly an ammonia-fueled ship or LNG? Or so, you know, at the moment, the industry has questions that the answer is up on their shoulders. Instead, maybe governments should give a clear direction and they say, okay, now I'm going to invest my $20 billion in my new fleet of ships. But then even if I choose, I want to have, I don't know, ammonia-fueled ships, first I need to have the technology, yeah? Second, I need to have the logistics. So I want this ship to do, I don't know, Asia, Europe, America. So I need to refuel this ship. So again, it's not your only decision. It's not mine if I'm a ship owner to say, oh, I'll go ammonia. No, because I need to have a port that say, okay, I have ammonia for you. So again, now what I've seen in energy transition that is very different from oil and gas. Oil and gas, you can take decision as your own company.
Mm-hmm. Because the system is set up, as you said, because the distribution ports.
Yes, it was all there. Yes.
You know, we have bodies like the IMO, which oversee the shipping industry, and of course are setting every year. But even when they set the IMO 2020 sulfur directive, there was pessimism on that. That okay, everyone started to should we convert our ships? Should we not? Because in a year from now, what's the next fuel? Directive. And so how do we get to the bottom of that in terms of being able to give those private sector the confidence to plan ahead?
So if I look at the IMO 2020, it was interesting because before the 2020, all the forecasts would say, oh, there's a collapse here, increase of demand of this clean fuel. After the 2020 came and there was not much change. So I think the industry, it will adapt. You know, it's like a human, we adapt. So we tend to panic, but we know how to adapt. So to me, it's more, let's plan properly. And this time we need to do together. So it's countries, it's governments, it's companies, but it's full ecosystem.
Jessica, what would be your, I mean, as we come to our last few minutes, sort of, looking over the horizon, if you like, we know what initiatives are being put in place right now today. But what would be your, over the horizon wish list, if you like, to be able to push this hydrogen agenda forward? I mean, we've talked about the policy, the directives that are needed. We've talked about how we need to attract investment and what it would take to that. But what are we not seeing already on the agenda that you would say would be, on the wish list? Is it technology needs to be developed further and faster? Costs need to come down. What is that?
Production costs to come down, definitely. More collaboration. We're going to need a huge amount of work on developing those standards, the safety regulations, all the industries, shipment standards, and so guarantees of origin. So I'd like to see more collaboration, but I'd also like to see less emphasis on cherry picking one technology for the future and realizing that we're going to be needing a mix of all technologies. And now with the pandemic and the need for economic recovery, all these economic recovery packages and the need to create more jobs in the future, if we do, and infrastructure is normally the fastest way to create jobs. So I would wish to see more focus on green infrastructure and various low carbon technologies, which would create jobs, green jobs, but also drive greener economies for the future. And in this, I would also like to see more green procurement laws being passed.
Antonio, why don't you have the last word again on your wish list? What would that be? Would you agree that we need more choice of tech, and we don't have to just be zeroing in on one of those?
That's correct. We need to have a portfolio of solutions because depending on where you are, one fuel is better than another. So definitely is that. Then also, I think we need to have a mindset change. One is more cooperation, and Jessica alluded that, you mentioned as well. definitely I'm seeing that the ecosystem are growing. I'm happy on that. The other things I want people to think is out of the box. Today we talk about $4 per kilo, $2, but actually go to see the end product. Now imagine mobile phones. So if I produce mobile phone from China and sent to USA with a ship cargo that is fueled by hydrogen, maybe I can send, I don't know, let's say 10,000 mobile phone. The price using hydrogen instead of to fuel oil, maybe is 1% of the total mobile phone. So would people pay 1% more your mobile phone than a green hydrogen mobile phone? People would say yes. But today we are missing that. Today we are focusing, oh, I need the $100, $200. I think we need to think a bit differently from what we've been thinking in the last 50 years or more.
Well, that certainly sounds like a good suggestion, recommendation to end on. And that is up to governments to put that into directives, and for companies also to highlight that they can do that. They're all coming under pressure, obviously, from their shareholders to show how they are meeting these new standards. So that is one way that Apple, for example, could certainly promote. So thank you very much. We've run out of time, I'm afraid. Thank you to our viewers for joining us. Jessica Obeid, thank you very much. And Antonio Della Pelle, thank you for joining us for the Energy Transition Dialogues today, and have a good remainder of the week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you
So much.